Today is Saturday, March 14th, 2025, and we welcome you to our session. Want to begin by asking you if there are any questions. Do you have any questions? Are there, I should say.
I do have a couple of questions, Pastor. This is Kathy, Grand Rising. Almost said good morning. Trying to break that habit of Grand Rising. I want to talk about two things. First thing, the second thing I want you to talk about, you mentioned Uncle Tom. And I want you to talk about that in depth a little more if you don't mind. But my first question goes back to something that Ron taught last week. He was reading from the Spirit of Intimacy book, and he talked about when there was a conflict among individuals in the village that they took them to an ash pit to resolve that conflict. I want to know if Ron would kind of review that quickly, and then I had some thoughts on that and questions along the lines of what that ash pit represents.
Okay. Uncle Tom. Before I delve into that, I want you to know, in 10 seconds or less, your perspective on Uncle Tom, not necessarily you, Kathy, but the perspective of those who are on.
I'd like to share. The reason I'm asking, I cannot
okay,
remember. I cannot remember when we were introduced to Uncle Tom, the reading. I don't know if it was college or high school or something, but Uncle Tom was portrayed as a character that no one wanted to be. And I can remember growing up in the 70s and things, if somebody called you an Uncle Tom, that meant you were like a sellout, and it was a really bad thing. But the perspective that you were sharing with us was so enlightening, so it made me realize I don't think I ever read that book, but somewhere along the lines of telling the story and the history of Uncle Tom, it all got distorted to make it look like a negative thing when it wasn't. That's why I'm asking that question.
Thank you. And you blew my question, girl. I wanted to see what the attitudes were, to see how many people thought that it was negative. But anyway, I'm going to address it. Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom was one of the most, loved man on the plantation. He was very well respected and had 10 tons of integrity. There were times when he when he was sold. First of all, when the master sold him, or his owner sold him, he sold him because he needed the money. And he told Uncle Tom that he would go sell him, or he would go have to sell the all the people on the plantation, the majority of them anyway. And Uncle Tom told his wife that he was going to be sold because he did not want all the other people to be sold. And it was better for him, one person to be, than for a whole family to be broken up. That's the first thing. Well, one of the first things he did. The other one was he went over one of the meanest traders, bought him, and bought him and a little boy. And the mother of the little boy ran away. And she went to Uncle Tom and told him, let's go. And he told her, no, I can't go with you because I don't want the rest of the people to be sold. But you be safe. And she left with her little boy. And then there was a time when this little girl, Uncle Tom was told to beat this little girl because she had done something that angered the owner. And he told him he was not going to do it. And the owner said to him, if you don't do it, you're going to take the licks. So he gladly took the whip to his back rather than to have this young lady beaten. So it's things like that that he did. And the reason that it was made to be negative, when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote that book, the Southern slave owners hated it because of the way it portrayed Uncle Tom. And they proceeded to give put out negative images about what was in the book. And that was no different than what they did with the watermelon or with the jockey, the little black jockey out in the front yard that denoted a safe place when you were on the Underground Railroad. So those things really spoke to the integrity in Uncle Tom's life. So where that came from is not from us; it's from white people. And I want to add an addendum to that, if I may. If we were so dumb and impossible to be educated, why were they afraid to let us read? And it's writings like that even though it's a fictional writing, it's writings like that that caused them to have problems with us reading. Kathy, I hope that at least partially answers your question.
No, that clears that up. Thank you, because like I said, we always grew up thinking if you were calling it Uncle Tom, you were really a bad person. That's how it was projected and portrayed to us growing up.
I agree with you, but don't let people take your uh, respect for Uncle Tom away, and don't disrespect Uncle Tom by calling somebody who's a race traitor Uncle Tom. That's highly disrespectful to a man of such integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron, could you speak to
Let me
what
ask
you
this
talked about? Oh, I'm sorry.
beforehand.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me see if there are any questions about Uncle Tom before we move forward from anyone else or statements.
Well, Reb, is there anything we need to know about the word Sambo?
The Black Sambo was the jockey out front. That's what they used to call the Sambo. And the Sambo also came from the lips of white folks because that Sambo represented the safe house for those on the Underground Railroad, as I said earlier. So everything that represented opportunities for us to be free or opportunities for us to unite or opportunities for us to do anything together were they were made to be an embarrassment to us by virtue of degrading their presence in our lives. And that's always the case. The other part of that is we right now, would you make sure your phones are muted, please? Right now, we are better organized right now than we ever been since enslavement. So, George, I hope that answers your question. George.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, Kathy, go ahead with the other question.
No, I just wanted Ron to review how in the village, the book he was reading from, if he would review that, because I had a thought on that, and I want to just kind of develop this thought and see if I'm on the right track with what I'm seeing with the representation of of the ash pit and resolving conflict in the ash pit.
Ron, if you're talking, we can't.
Oh, yes, yes, he's unavailable right now. He's coming right back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
he's
thank you.
unavailable. Mhm.
Okay.
While while he's coming back, the reason I believe that we're more organized now than ever before is because no one organized us. This is not human organization that we are experiencing. This is spiritual organization, spiritual unicity that we are experiencing. And this is the largest organized body of Africans to ever live on this earth. The physical organization that represented more people than any other organization on this earth was Marcus Garvey's organization, UNIA.
Are you on with your face to show?
So, and he was jailed, and the organization fell apart when he was deported. But the structure that we are currently living under, or the authority rather, we we cannot be disjointed because there is actually no one to be arrested or no one to be assassinated because you can't assassinate, neither can you imprison an idea whose time has come. And the ideology that we are professing now cannot be stopped. Excuse me. And I would like to address that even more after Ron has responded to Kathy's question. Is Ron available?
Yeah, how we doing this morning?
Good, how are you?
Sorry about that. What we talked about, I was speaking from the spirit of intimacy, and what I was seeing in that is how much alike what she's describing and what we do. She talks about the ash circle and going in ash circle because it allows you to connect with spirit. Is recognizing who you are and your need to see further spiritually who you are. So the ash circle not only allows you to connect with spirit, in other words, connect with God, it allows you to see who you are. It allows you to be or see yourself from a different perspective. It allows you to see the importance in looking at community. So in doing that, it sort of not only ties everything together, ties who you are. It brings you closer. If you do it with your spouse, it brings you closer to your community and everybody in it. It is a way of praying. It is a way of becoming conscious of and aware of self, and it is aware of recognizing that you are not an island. You belong to the oneness that you are belongs to the many. So that's what we talked about, and we even connected the ashes because I was looking at something else that talked about man made from the dust of the ground, and those are looking at something connected with David, putting it when they mourned and they put themselves in ashcloth. All of that is talking about the same thing. So and Barbara tied that up beautifully to what we were saying. The ash, the importance of the ash, and the humility of the ash, and the even returning to beginning. So I'm trying to say it as much as I remember, and then somebody else uh, remember something else of it. Please help me out. Does that help, Kathy?
Actually, Ron, that was the part that I wanted to ask about because you talked about the ash circle and the dust. And I had the salt last week, but I wanted to sit with it a little further just to see, because I started going back to when spirit leaves the body and the corpse is being lowered into the grave. some of the phrase that I've heard spoken is ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's as though you're returning to that from which you came. So my thing was, and I keep going back to this. I asked the question a few weeks ago about the cloud of witnesses. Are those ancestors? And I thought about last year when we talked about the dust cloud coming out of Africa being the ancestors who were changing, and they at that time were shaping weather patterns and changing things as the dust came from that continent to here. That takes me back to seeing the cloud of witnesses in that part in the circle of sitting in the circle of the ash circle, because if those ashes are representative of dust particles, and I'm just thinking this through, and I would love any help that you can give me, is that not the cloud of ancestors? Because I see that when we have individual visitations from ancestors, from someone in our family per se, that opens me up to the realization of the spirit world existing. But if I think of my ancestry alone and everyone in my family who has transitioned on before me from the inception of time, and if they are only going to give me, my family, visit me to give me wisdom in various ways on particular things that I'm dealing with, that will be a lot of different individuals having to figure me out. But when they move as a cloud of dust, as they move as a cloud of particles, being driven by what? Wind, spirit, breath, all of that is spiritual. I'm seeing that the cloud of witnesses may have a dual meaning in that it may actually have something to do with martyrs, but could it possibly be that the ancestors move as a cloud of witnesses, bringing this in, and when you're sitting in that circle, you're getting back in contact with the very fiber and the very makeup of who you are and your very being, and that's how you can walk away with the wisdom of the ancestors, and not just an ancestor from my family, but the wisdom of all ancestors who move together in that cloud. I'm kind of seeing that, and I may not be explaining it very well, but it resonates to me. I think it's something more to ancestry and the cloud of witnesses, and why the community knew to take you to sit in the ash circle to get wisdom to bring resolution to whatever conflicts you may have been facing. So I just wanted to know any thoughts that you, Pastor, or anyone else may have on this, or if you can kind of see what I'm seeing here, and if I'm off track, let me know. But it resonates deeply that this cloud that we've been speaking about of witnesses is representative of the dust, the ash, and the whole spiritual community of ancestors moving about as a body together to bring wisdom to the universe. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I think that was beautiful. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Excuse me. Go ahead, Ron.
No, Sheldon, I was just going to add or ask a question, because Pastor and I were talking earlier this morning, and he said something, and Kathy just reminded me of it. So I'll say this part and I'll let you finish. What he reminded me of the question I had this morning is somewhere in Scripture, it talked about when one of the patriarchs died, being buried with my fathers. And I thought about that. If earth is consciousness and becoming aware of who you are and valuing self and valuing your spirituality, or what does that say about being buried with my fathers? So Kathy just kind of reminded me of that when she talked about the ash circle. But go ahead, please. I'd appreciate any help you can give on that, because I don't know. Thank you.
This is Sheldon. Yeah, to Kathy, what you mentioned after Ron talked about this last week, I had looked to try to find out more in regards to the ash circle in Africa spiritual traditions, and I did find a few things that it actually I guess it's used for, or represents, or what is actually going on. And so I was going to, and they align with some of what you were talking about just now. and there's basically like a few themes. So one of them being purification. Ash itself is a product of burning, a transformative process that reduces something to its elemental form. This symbolizes cleansing and purification. The circle represents a space where impurities are neutralized and spiritual cleanliness is restored or maintained. Connection to ancestors. In many traditions, ash is linked to the ancestors. Fire is often seen as a bridge between the living world and the spirit world. The ash circle can represent a point of contact, a place where communication or communion with ancestors is facilitated. It is a way of honoring them and invoking their guidance or protection. The circle itself can represent the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, connecting the living to those who have passed. Sacred space, the act of creating a circle, regardless of the material, democrates a sacred space. It separates the mundane from the spiritual, creating a zone dedicated to ritual, prayer, healing, or other spiritual practices. The ash reinforces this sacredness due to its inherent symbolic properties. And then transformation and transition, because ash represents the result of burning, is connected to the idea of change. The circle can symbolize a period of transformation, a rite of passage, or a transition between states of being. Example from sickness to health, from childhood to adulthood, or even in rituals related to death and mourning. I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon. That clears up a lot. Thank you. So it sounds like maybe we're on the right track of seeing this a little broader than what we were originally thinking. Is even more. So thank you.
Yeah, it just reminds me of a lot of the stuff in the I guess that we were taught more so in the Bible. We're not looking at things in just as an act, but trying to understand the spirituality in it and that transformative part and actually experience it in terms of what it was meant for, in terms of, you know, our being, etc.
Anyone else?
Oh, awesome.
Go ahead, Sheldon.
Oh, I was just saying I was finished because I kind of like paused and I didn't signify that I was finished, but thank you.
Okay. Audrey?
Thanks for that question, Cassie, because I've been asking that question too about the ancestors and the cloud of witnesses. But the ancestors, they can't be like your relatives. I mean, although you think about them in terms of your relatives, but they are basically a collective consciousness.
Yeah.
That we sort of tap into. So not exactly just your relatives, but all of that collective consciousness is what we tap into. And I'm just trying to gather my thoughts, but that's what I think about when I think about what the ancestors are, because we know that in the spirit world, there is no me, you, them over there or whatever. It's just consciousness. So it is all a collective that we tap into. Anyway, that's basically what I want to say.
And thank you, Audrey, because that's what I'm seeing too. And I know we get sometimes, because we do have visitations from relatives in dreams or however they may choose to show themselves to us. But I was thinking it's got to be more than that. And that's what resonated with me when we were talking about this last week, because I see it as really a cloud of, like you said, of consciousness. So that makes even more sense to me. So thank you for sharing that.
May I add something to that also?
Yes, please.
The reason that we see or the visitation from our relatives is because it simply is a familiar spirit. It's not that person being there, but it's a familiar spirit because of it's a part of the collective consciousness, but it gets your attention more if you have an apparition or a vision of someone who is related to you. And that continues as I read in a book that speaks to African religions, that continues until that person's name is not spoken anymore, meaning that uh, after the generations have passed and they no longer remember um, that relative's name, that name is no longer in the earth, then it remains a part of the collective consciousness, but that, and you're still guided by that collective consciousness, but you are not aware. It doesn't have its shock value, or it doesn't have its attention grabbing value as it once did. There are people who say, well, I've never seen anybody, but yet they come out their mouth with things that they never read, never understood. And that definitely comes from ancestors. And then there are those, as you mentioned, who say that I saw my aunt, my cousin, my whatever. And from them you get an understanding. The difference also is you may see them and hear nothing. You may see them and say nothing. And you may have a sense of a presence and not know who it is in terms of that familiarity. But it's in you because what it actually does, uh, it actually activates, or for lack of a better word, the essence of who you are and guides you in the direction that you should travel in. Meaning that when you're dealing with something and you're searching for answers and you just let it go, then all of a sudden you see yourself um, when you look retrospectively of having come through that thing that you were dealing with. That's guidance from the ancestors without necessarily having identification or being related to you in the sense of one time there was a biological relationship. If I see my grandmama, that's not her speaking to me as much as it is the collective consciousness, but it gets my attention. It gets my attention to listen. And when you get to the place where you are aware of the ancestry, you sense the present, but you don't necessarily see anyone in your family, but you get the same message. And there are so many people, inclusive of us, who have experienced this and just brushed it off in the past, but not anymore, not anymore. I want to say this for those who may be on for the first time. When we talk about ancestors, we're not talking about ancestor worship because that actually doesn't exist. When we talk about ancestor, we're talking about ancestral respect. And the reason we have gone to this thing of ancestry worship is because that's what we have been told for the last 2,000 years by the church. But that's not it. When we talk about spiritual essence and us being better organized than ever, it's more about a recognition of who we are. And I think I know how it came about. Um, when we began to talk about the beginnings in terms of the Kushites and how spirituality and religion came into the earth, it is during that period that there seemed to have been an increased search by Africans in particular as to who they are. And we begun to see more on social media and hear more discussions about not only the achievement of Africans, but the presence of Africans and how Christianity had changed the spiritual essence of the African, even though spirituality is far more and much older than Christianity, Judaism, or Islam for that matter. The other thing is that in the African spirituality, every aspect of your life is involved in it. In the church is not. What I mean by that is in spirituality, you respect you do things that respect the ancestors, and you do things that respects the whole village. And whether you are drawing water from the well or whether you're shopping in a grocery store, your spirituality is evident by the choices you make and by the things that flows through your mind. However, religion doesn't do that. Religion does not come into play but one day a week, and that's on Sunday or Saturday, whether you're whether it's Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, is governed by those days. However, the aspects of it is talked about in church, but you don't see the action of it outside of that building. And sometimes you don't see it even in that building. And that is the reason that Nat Turner was flayed, and they used his skin for a change purse. And they took his bones and gave them away for souvenirs. And what was left of him, they boiled it into grease, made grease from the rest of what was left of him. And then there was no problem with them going to church at all. So that in itself speaks to the edicts of the Christianity that we were taught, the Christianity that we were taught, that you can do anything you want to do as long as you say you're in love with Jesus. You can do anything you want to do. And that's evident when we look at religion. But it's not like that with spirituality. You can walk away from religion when you close that church door, but you cannot do that with spirituality. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Yes, it does.
Ron?
No, I'm just agreeing with you. It makes sense. I do have a question. I want to back up to something else that Kathy mentioned. We have when we first started talking about the dust coming across from Africa. How do you feel about now? Is there more insight into that? Do you see something more in it?
You talking just to me, right? Yeah, I do.
You or anybody else may have some insight into
okay.
that. That's fascinating to me.
I do, but I want to see if anyone else has anything to add to that. It gives me. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting because since we started talking about that dust, that's been what, a few years ago?
Yeah.
There's been such an increase in people talking about ancestors. I mean,
Yeah.
to such an extent that I had never heard before. So I think the fact that we sort of put it out there, but also because of the dust itself, it has sort of opened people up to the reality of spiritual ancestors. So I think it's made a big difference since we first started talking about it.
I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
It has made a huge difference. Um, paraphrasing something that John Henry Clark said, paraphrasing, he said that white people have that white people lynch us and they enslave us and they justify it by saying that is God's will and we're relegated to servitude because that's what God determined. So in doing so, what has happened is um, God has been relegated to being a racist. God has been relegated to being a bigot. And that makes all the sense in the world to me. As to the reason, our people say, that's not the God that they serve, that's not the God I know. Because if the one who created me has made the decision that I am supposed to submit to all types of barbarian attitudes and actions, then I don't want that God in my life. There is no God to me. God doesn't exist for me, if that is the case. And that's what we have been convinced of. And subconsciously, people still believe that. They don't want to talk about it, but they still believe that they're subservient. Anytime that you whisper around white folks and talk loud around black folks, that's your God. You have embraced that as your God because you're afraid of it. If you remind yourself that you are a spiritual entity and you came from a spiritual entity, and this body is simply a vehicle, if you remind yourself of that, and then you remind yourself that the only thing that Europeans has given us is an improved method of killing people, but nothing else. No agriculture, no religion, no scientific discoveries, none of that. Except when it comes to taking the life of maiming humanity. When you remind yourself of that, you begin to understand that that is not the will of those of our Creator. And right now, what we're experiencing is indeed the will of our Creator. All the suffering is the will of our Creator, and it's simply because before people get to a organized space of desire for change, nothing happens. And think about it this way. No one made a clarion call. No one got on MSNBC or NBC, CBS, or ABC. No one got on CNN and said, you know what? To all Africans in this country, we are not going to be a part of these demonstrations in the street. Nobody said that. But across the board, we did it. We just stayed home. Why? How did that happen? How did that happen? Because of our spiritual nature. We talked about how you could say, what's up, dog, on the East Coast, and 2 days later it's on the West Coast. Nobody sends a memo. So how does it get there? We are those people who are able to pick up from the macro really what we need to do in response to those things that threaten us. Excuse me. And the ones out there who are, especially European women, are complaining because we are not out there. Why are they doing that? They're not doing that because they love us. They're doing it because they want our support, our know-how. They want us out there. And the collective interest is saying, oh no, We're not coming out there because you want us out there. And then what happens is we don't go. The European women especially began to become more silent about it. And then what happens? The government decides that they're going to close Civil Rights Museum and Selma, the bus station. They go close that, and that was a dig to get us on the street, to make us, to upset us, and we didn't bite. Why did they want us out there so badly? Because they wanted to declare martial law, and we are the puppets they would use to do that. Because when you see white people out there, you don't see riot gear. When you see us out there, you see riot gear. And they wanted to use that as an excuse. Why do I bring that up? Because again, every aspect of our life is governed by spirituality. There is absolutely nothing in our lives that's not governed by spirituality. Even if you don't embrace it, it's still governed by it. Religion does not have any effect on what I just talked about in terms of getting us out there and why they want us out there. Because if you delve into the Christianity and the ones who gave it to us, they are the ones who want us out there. They are the ones who put Trump in office. They are the one who is in the process of creating these issues. And well, I'll stop right there because I was going to do a comparison between the power, the lack of power of Christianity. Go ahead, Ron. You had something.
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Anyone else?
Want to ask you a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I yield.
No, go ahead, Evelyn.
Oh, okay. So, Pastor Jay and family, are we seeing things manifesting the way they are because the veil has been torn? It's like the physical and the spiritual is merging together. I remember one time I heard you say that, well, it may not be you, but the veil has been pierced or something like that. I don't know, but if these things are happening because the veil has been torn and the physical and the spiritual is merging, that's my question.
Okay. The
No.
veil. The veil is representative of the hymen. And you can't give birth unless it has been torn. So when we talk about the veil being cut or the veil being pierced, we're talking about the spiritual hymen being torn for the express purpose of birth. So what we are seeing is, what we're experiencing rather, is the birthing of a nation. And in order for a nation to be birthed, there has to be a unicity between the material world and the spiritual world. Because the whole purpose for a nation being structured is for people, humans, to be able to live in this space in harmony. Countries does not talk about people, it talks about mostly greed, to be honest with you, and control. But you cannot have a nation without people because people are the nation. Does that make sense, Evan?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Or say anything about it? Question?
So are you saying, yes, that the physical is merging with the
Yes,
physical?
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay. I
See,
got
I
it.
don't think it.
Thank you.
I don't think it's merging, Evan. The thought just hit me. I don't think it's merging as much as it is the birthing of an awareness that the spirituality is always available to us, and the more aware we become of it, the more as above, so is below. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm thinking about the word merging,
But the reason I
or
say it's not
becoming
merging
one. I
is
should have said, okay.
is because if it were merging, that means that it was separate. It's never been separate. We just not been aware of it.
Oh, okay, because of the law of correspondence. Okay, I got you. As above, so below. I got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have a question. Hold on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about spiritual complexity and what's going on right now currently.
See again now, I didn't get the first part.
I have a question about spiritual complacency and what's going on right now currently.
Okay.
What are you looking at?
The scripture
Okay. I think spiritual, when you talk about spiritual complacency, I think is more depression than it is complacency. I think it's more of a sense of not being able to do anything about what's currently going on than it is complacency. Because complacency indicates to me that you know what's going on and you're going along with it. But why would you go along with it? Because you are despondent. And then despondency has led us to a sense of depression. How does that work in terms of what's going on? Well, you have what, 80,000 people laid off from the government, however many it is. And then you have tariffs in place. So you working in an assembly plant in Spartanburg assembling BMWs, and you can't get the materials that you need. You can't get the electronic parts. You can't get the steel, the aluminum, because of how much it costs. Now, you are afraid that you're going to be laid off because you're working at an assembly plant. You're afraid you're going to be laid off. And you don't know what you're going to do if you are laid off because you work for a temp service and you live from paycheck to paycheck because you don't make the same thing that permanent workers make. And once you laid off, now what happens? It's a residual effect. You can't pay rent. You can't buy gas. So even though you have not been laid off, that depression is heavy on you because you don't know when it's going to happen. Am I making sense so far? And you're muted.
Yeah, I was listening. Yes, I agree. And I also think from the people who are causing what you're saying, it's that desire or thought of what you want to do and have no particular mindset on how it affects others. Just doing really what you want to do and not realizing or even caring the trickle down effect of what we're seeing right now of others, of other people, what they're going through or yet to go through.
Uh-huh. I think it's worse than that. I think they don't care.
Mm.
They know what's happening. They are very much aware of what's happening down the line, but they don't care because as long as you can keep people in a state of chaos, you can do whatever you want to do, and they are worried about survival as opposed to paying any attention to what you're doing with the government. Right now, people are upset and depressed because of their jobs.
Mm. Mm.
And what what's happening is there are a group of people who who are committed to becoming more aware of the spiritual nature of our essence, who are constantly putting in the macro what's going on and why it's happening. So the people are beginning to see their depression being directly connected to what is happening with the government. In the past, it wasn't like that. They disconnected from it. Now, the people of whom I speak are not us. I'm not talking about African. I'm talking about Europeans in this country.
Right.
And the only reason that they are being able to relate that is because it's affecting them directly. When most people think is that the majority of our government, our federal jobs are in DC. That's not true. They're scattered all over the country. The Treasury Center, where most of the what do you call those things? That store your message, computer message, the servers. Most of the servers
Satellite.
in West Virginia. And when they got rid of all the people in West Virginia, this little town where it is located, they had to reinstate them because there was no money there. So the people who are being hurt the most are the ones who voted for this administration. And the Canadians said that the reason they pull American liquor off the shelves is because it has a direct effect on the people who voted for Donald Trump because of the amount of jobs that it creates in Kentucky. And it also affects the production of corn and oats and everything that goes into it. And these things are grown in red states. And now you can't go get on Medicaid because with this bill that passed the other night, Medicaid is to be cut or frozen, and it gives them the right to do that. So even though it's difficult, because as I said, I felt nauseated when Chuck Schumer decided that they were going to vote yes. I felt nauseated. Then I had to remind myself that this is what happened. This is supposed to happen. I got physically sick when that happened, thinking about the people who are going to suffer as a result of it. So the Creator is allowing all these things to come together at one time. This is a perfect storm. And the perfection of the storm is that it's dismantling this government as it should have been dismantled from the beginning. The reason it wasn't dismantled is because we were not in place. The African was not in place. The African was so caught up in church until he lost sight of his spiritual essence. What do I mean? How have we been kept made to be unaware of who we are? When we were enslaved, we were given, well, even prior to that, we were given Christianity. And we were told that we are in the predicament that we are in because of the color of our skin, because of Kush. We were told that. And we were given a Jesus who does not look like us, but looks like them. And subliminally, that tells you that your God is European. And people acquiesce to that. Look at the number of the paintings of Jesus that's on the back of a fan or in the church that's European. All of that is psychology, the psychology of manipulation. So now here we are following principles that are 100% against us, redlining justified by Christianity. The idea of subjugation in projects is justified by Christianity. How many preachers stood in the pulpit and said that you could make it in this country if you're willing to work? Well, if you're willing to work and don't have a place to work, you can't make it. And that's what has been taking place. The intercity is a code name for Black folks. And all the jobs have been taken out of those areas. So there's no place to work and brought to the South because the wages in the South are cheaper. So all of these factors have come into play, and they are coming to a head now only because it affects white people. They have never cared about what affects us, ever. So that's where we are with this. And honestly, we have not seen the worst yet. This is just the tip of the spear. We have not seen the worst yet. The iceberg is beginning to melt. And we are going to see much, much more come into play that's going to have an adverse effect on all of us. Yet, that adverse effect won't break us because we have been living in a state of adversity forever. I don't care how much money you make, you still treated the same way. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who you are, you're treated the same way. So here we are, y'all. And I have chosen spirituality over religion because spirituality speaks more to my essence and it gives me a clearer view of our Creator and the reason that we are in this earth. We live today, right now, this country, people are going through hell. And the church is justified. I remember the church saying, let's just pray. And nothing changed. You on this phone, on Zoom or wherever you're on, have you seen change in your lifetime?
No.
Have you seen change in your lifetime?
Seems a little worse, honestly.
Yes. So
It's like you say, Pastor, it's like history repeating itself.
yeah, and the only history that repeats itself is the history from enslavement or from the Reconstruction to this point. When it comes to the interaction between us, and we have carried Europeans to beginning as we have gone to beginning, meaning that we have gone to beginning to see or to become more aware of our spiritual essence. And we have carried them with us, Europeans, their mindset with us. What do I mean by that, carrying that mindset? Look at the nature of things. Look at how representative the leadership in this country is of Europeans in the state that they were in before they found somebody else to kill. They were killing each other until they found someone else who did not look like them to kill. Not only that, hygiene was not a factor in their lives. They didn't even know what hygiene was. And at best, they took a bath once a year, or women took a bath when they were just before they got married, and that was it. And if you look at the facial expression of Amy Coney Barrett, the Supreme Court Justice, if you look at her facial expression when Donald Trump walked past her, you will see that she almost vomited in her mouth because he stinks. And that is indicative of what Europeans were before the Moors. We taught them what hygiene is supposed to be like. So I'm saying that with their violent nature, we're going to take Canada, we're going to take Greenland, we're going to invade Mexico. That was the criteria at that time for being strong. Europeans, that mindset. And we see that mindset developing all over again. And the people in South Africa, the white people in South Africa said they're not leaving. Some of them are, but the majority of them said, we're fine, we're not leaving. Now, behind the scenes, there's an effort to justify going into South Africa militarily. And you say, well, I doubt that very seriously. Well, let me see if any questions before I justify what I'm saying. By history, of course. Well,
General Pastor, I do have a quick question. When you said that the African is in place, can you speak about that across a context? What do you mean by that?
the African is more aware of itself, its essence, its purpose than ever before. Does that help, Regina?
Yes, sir. I guess I'm looking to see what does it look like in practice in this dimension.
What it looks like in practice is what we are doing right now. What we do 3 days a week is make us more aware of what it looks like for the African to fulfill hold on one second. For the African to fulfill its purpose for being in the earth. And the purpose for the African being in the earth is to be expressive of the divinity that it is, being created in the image and likeness of God, of Elohim. Being created in that likeness means that we are divine as well. And being the first people on earth says that we are the first recipients of this divine essence. And the reality of the melanin that we have in us speaks to our nature. It speaks to our desire to not only be aware of who we are, but to also recognize the who sought to destroy us, but recognizing them without hatred, recognizing them with love, because of their mindset is violent. And we are actually, they are our children because they came from us. And our attitude, our forgiving nature, our having a nature of having mercy, the essence of us loving in spite of, all of that is because of melanin. The European mindset does not love itself, let alone anybody else. It has mercy on no one. And it does not really have a conscience in that it doesn't bother them when they are um, what when they show us their barbaric nature. That mindset is quite the opposite of ours. And the purpose of our being in this earth is to transform that mindset, to bring salvation to that deliverance to that mindset, so that that mindset will no longer be the dominant force in the earth. I was I had a conversation with Clark, my granddaughter, and she took me places in understanding spirituality and how we are, as Africans, are supposed to, um, how we function once we're aware of ourselves. And one of the things she said, I think I know we've touched it before. And mind you, she's never on with us, never. And she said to me, I said to her, I said, okay, so how do we bring salvation to people, or a people who think like that, a people who survive by being barbarians? And she says to me, Papa, there's only one way you can do it. She said, it's called the Browning of America. The resistance to that is a resistance to being balanced in your mindset. The resistance to that is desire to maintain a barbaric mindset. So on both ends, the Caucasian and the African have fought that. Black women say that every time a black man gets money, he with a white woman. Well, quite frankly, when you look at that with the athletes, they be with them when they're in college. That starts in college, whether they make it to the pros or not. That's a horse of a different color. So I'm not dealing with that. I want to deal with the fact that both are resistant. The white folks want to do it behind the scenes, white men especially. However, until that interaction becomes a reality, and I mean physical interaction becomes a reality, there will be no spiritual interaction. And that's what brings balance to the earth. When people become, when people's mindset is one of forgiveness and mercy and love and all those other attributes. Regina, I hope I'm not just rambling in reference to your question.
Oh, no, sorry, you're giving good insight.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay.
I guess I'm thinking about the Browning of America. I do see it the way you just described it in the physical sense, but it's more than just the stronger part of it. It's not just in the physical sense, right? It's the spiritualness of it. What's the resistance of it in the spiritual sense? It would not be the black female so much, would it? You understand my question?
I do.
Because what you describe is a literal thing. And the Browning of America, as we have talked about and described it, that's only a small portion of it. So where is the resistance then? The resistance, I guess, spiritually would be religion, wouldn't it?
The resistance of it, well, religion is not aware of it at all. Religion looking to go to heaven,
Okay.
as opposed to changing the hearts of mankind. It is more than a physical, there is more than a physical context to this. The physical context is a result of the spiritual reality. And the spiritual reality is that melanin has a very strong influence, I should say, on your emotions. It has a very strong influence on every single thing in your life in this earth. Melanocyte is present, but melanocyte is different than melanin. Melanocyte has to be converted into melanin by, oh my God, the enzyme that is present only in people of color, primarily the African. That enzyme is not present in Europeans. So therefore, the only way that conversion can take place is through interaction with Africans. And that's the spiritual, and melanin is simply a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth. And the spiritual truth of melanin is that it is foundational for life itself. And the idea of melanin being increased within the body only happens in us when we're in the sun. In the European, it does not take place. That's why they have to use suntan lotion to keep from getting skin cancer. And we use suntan lotion and get cancer. And if you don't believe what I'm talking about, look at the elements that's in any sunscreen or suntan lotion, whatever you want to call it. Look at the ingredients and then do your research, and you will find that they're carcinogenic. We don't need that, but we put them on our skins anyway. And we have been, through neglect, taught that melanin is not important, when it's the most important element in the earth. So there is no separation between melanin and spirituality. There is no separation. When it comes to melanin and spirituality, it is already as above, so is below, in terms of the melanin. The functionality of melanin has not been realized to the extent that it should have been. And we are in the process now of becoming more aware of the of melanin, its purpose, and how influential it is when we start talking about spirituality. There is no spiritual understanding. I want you to hear me now. And I want you to question this. There is no spiritual understanding without melanin. There are spiritual questions, but the depth of spiritual understanding does not exist without melanin. And it does not exist in the church because the church ignores melanin. The church ignores ancestors. The church ignores everything that's African, even though everything that's African has been in the earth for 4 million years and Christianity for 2,000. So when we talk about that, I see what you're asking, but I don't see a level of distinction between spirituality and melanin. Does that make sense, sir?
It does.
Anyone else? Questions or comments?
I have a question to ask, sir. Given everything that we learned about Jesus Christ over the past couple of months, my question is, what is the true meaning of the Antichrist, and are we the Antichrist?
The Antichrist, as it is presented in the church, says that if you are the Antichrist, you going to hell, you're against Jesus. Well, when we look at the reality of what the scriptures are spiritual in nature, and they are a mystery. And when we look at the history of Jesus, the only place where we can find any evidence of Jesus is in the Bible. When we start looking at it historically, we began to see that Serapis Soter became Jesus, the Jesus that is in the Bible over the years. What I mean is that there was a battle between the Africans, the African priesthood in Kemet, and Stephen, the one who had been forced to make Ptolemy a god, or to convince him that he was a god. And from that came a minted coin of Serapis Soter. Soter means savior. And during that period of time, at the conferences, the conference at Ephesus, the one, the Nicene conference, at those conferences, there were debates about whether or not this entity called Jesus had whether he had a body or whether it was spiritual. And the name Jesus actually came from the Greek god Zeus. So when we look at it from that perspective and see that there was never a physical human in the earth named Jesus. When we look at it from that perspective, being the Antichrist is not what the church said it is. Being the Antichrist means that you are telling people that what you have been taught about this Christ is not right. Because the only reason that Christ was added to the name Christos is because the Catholic Church and the church in Greece came to a conclusion, a conclusion that it was both, that Jesus was physical and Jesus was spiritual. And if you look at the scriptures, you will find that the letters of Paul is where you find Jesus the Christ. In the other sections of it, you don't find that. You find Christ independently spoken of, or Jesus. So these scriptures during the Dark Ages, these scriptures were taken from the Kemetic writings, sacred writings, and they were manipulated. And the manipulation of them made everything in the scriptures physical as opposed to they being spiritual. On one hand, we are told that the scriptures are spiritual. And then when we began to talk about the spiritual nature of the scriptures and what they mean spiritually, then we are told that we're blaspheming. So we can't have it both ways. Either they are spiritual or they're not. And they are indeed spiritual. So it is actually telling us about ourselves. This is not defining who God is. The scriptures define who we are, but you have to be able to decipher them in the manner that they were written, as opposed to deciphering them based upon some theologian who does not even know what the word theology really means. And if they did know what it really means, they would understand that it is impossible to be a theologian. So we are, in that sense, yes, the Antichrist, and meaning that we are against the lie that religion has told us. Does that make sense, Myra?
It does. So is it safe to say that Antichrist, Sambo, Uncle Tom, and watermelon, all these things were a positive thing that connect us to our culture and spirituality that Caucasians or the church tried to deflect us from?
Yes, the whole name of Jesus is no different than the attitude toward Uncle Tom. It is Jesus. If you look at the true meaning of it, it's not the proper name at all. It speaks to deliverance. It's not a proper name. It speaks to deliverance. And when we talk about that in terms of deliverance, what is deliverance? Deliverance is not bringing you from earth to heaven or sending you to hell from earth. Deliverance is actually changing your mindset to be that a mindset of spirituality as opposed to a mindset of materialism. A mindset of our Creator as opposed to a mindset of greedy individuals who are barbaric at heart. And when we look at ourselves, we have bought into this idea of material prosperity when we are actually living in spiritual poverty. This idea of material, the ownership of material things determining who you are in relationship to society are the very things that make you spiritually poverty, put you in spiritual poverty. And because we hear the same messages over and over again in church, that keeps us in spiritual poverty. And by virtue of keeping us in spiritual poverty, that is the reason we have not seen any changes, significant anyway, in our livelihood in this country, in particular in this world totally. So now that we are beginning to see things from a spiritual perspective, the Creator is showing us stuff that we've never seen before and correlations that we've never made. And one of those correlations is the only history that repeats itself is the history of us being in this country and where we are today. The true nature of this repetitiveness of history actually started, the history started in 1870 when we talk about Reconstruction, and it ended in 1877. And that was the end of Reconstruction. Now, here we are. We are in a place now where everything has to be reconstructed because it's being currently dismantled. And that is the country being dismantled. So that can be a construction of a nation in its place that benefits all of humanity. I know I said a lot, but there are some questions in order to answer them, you have to give some historical background for understanding. And I thank you for bearing with me in doing so. Does that help you, Mom? And the rest of you, of course.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
I guess this today was kind of a measurement, because every time I think I'm getting further and further away from religion, something is said that kind of shocks me, Myra just called us the Antichrist, and for a brief second there, that hurt my feelings. But I see it, I see it and I agree with it.
I feel you, Ron.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, like what? Yeah, okay.
Mr. Ron, when
I
that
want to add something to that, actually.
Go ahead. Myra, hold 1 second.
Oh,
Myra,
well,
what are you saying?
now,
yeah.
when the question came about, it shocked me too. I was like, wait a minute. We've been told our whole lives that it was the opposite. So trust me, it wasn't easy to say or even just for it to come about. But thank you for hearing me.
See, I didn't take that away from you guys. Myra did. It wasn't my fault. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I wanted to respond to that because if you look at what the the story and the imagery associated with Jesus as a construct of the church is, then spirituality is very much anti whatever that is. And in that sense, I would agree, yeah. What we are pursuing is very much anti what the religious construct of the Christ, quote unquote, is. However, I will say that I believe that associated with that concept, because if you take the story of Jesus to be essentially another retelling of the general body of wisdom that came out of Kemet and other places, then that concept still has spiritual validity in that the Christ, which in Kemet, which would have been Heru or Horus, which in the Hindu tradition is Krishna, these are very much directly related to spiritual concepts. And in that sense, the Antichrist is anything that is sort of resistive or against bringing about the general spiritual awareness that we've been talking about is necessary for the sort of nation of human beings to be founded on stable ground. So in that sense, the Antichrist, like you would maybe describe that in the Kemetic tradition as Set, who is the sort of anti-Heru, if I'm getting that correct. But the point is, there is represented in all of that body of wisdom the idea that there is a sort of opposing force to the positive spiritual force. And that opposing force is that which is anti-Christ, quote unquote. It is the whatever is resistant to or in opposition to the establishment of stability, spiritual awareness, and harmony in the earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions,
Thank you.
comments? Right?
No, I just said thank you. I can agree. I can see what he was saying.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. And I don't know if I should direct this to Nick or not, but we hadn't talked about Kendrick Lamar's performance at the Super Bowl and how what he did has went across the globe. I wanted to know what's the significance of him doing what he did, because it's like everybody got caught on. All different types of culture has caught on to what he did and what he's saying. And also now you see the line dances with boots on the ground. So I know these things have spiritual meaning. I just want to know, again, I'm directing this to Nick and whoever, what's the significance of all of this? That's my question.
Thank you. Yeah, I can respond to that in the way that I know how. In general, hilariously, the sort of pop culture beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar is a sort of pop culture representation of the struggle of African consciousness. On the one hand, you have Kendrick, who is black African, and on the other hand, you have Drake, who is wanting to be white in a lot of ways. And the reason the Kendrick Lamar came out on top, which, I mean, if you ask anybody with any sense at all, they will say that Kendrick Lamar is the victor in all this, is because the African consciousness is much more firmly established in its sort of spiritual responsibility than even it is aware of consciously at a pop culture level. And Kendrick Lamar is representative of that African spirituality. Now, the symbolism is all Christianity because that is the context that it comes out of. That's just the Africans have been, propagandized too in that way since forever. As long as they've been in this country. So that is the sort of context that takes on. but the spirituality and the consciousness is filtered through that. So, I mean, there's a lot of specific symbolism within the, Super Bowl performance, and I don't have all that on the top of my head, but I believe and am aware of the nature of that interaction, the nature of the mindsets that are at play here in Kendrick Lamar versus Drake and everything Drake represents. Drake is the sort of status quo. I sort of want to be like the white people, and that's sounds more derogatory than I mean it, but he wants to be like the white people. He has connection to the sort of Jewish culture and money, etc., because he technically is Jewish. But all of that is representative of that sort of status quo mindset that is characteristic of that which is antichrist. And Kendrick Lamar is the opposite. He was not in the house. He is from the field. And he is remembering through his struggle and his performance where he comes from and the spirituality that underlies all of it. So that is what we've seen play out in that interaction. But I'm done.
I'll ask you a question. Is it possible to correlate that with the church in that Kendrick Lamar is the one who refused to preach in the Caucasian church at Easter because all they want us to do is sing. And Drake is in the church is the one who is excited by the opportunity of getting to preach in a white church.
That makes sense to me.
But that's what I saw when you were talking about it. There were so many things that we can use to equate that to or to correlate that to.
Pastor, may I add something to that? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add one thing that really surprised me later that I didn't hear until much later, because we know the importance of dance in the African culture, and the dances that were performed during that Super Bowl were choreographed by a young African female. And nobody, I mean, I saw later where there were write-ups about her wisdom and her talent. She put all of that together for him. They've been childhood friends forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that resonated the most with me also, not only that, because the dance symbolized so much of who we are and the backs of the country being built on our backs. She had to see a vision to put that together for him. But the other thing that I walked away with a smile and I got it, is the song, They're Not Like Us. And that's when things are going on in this country, I'm reminded it's okay, stay the course, because they're not like you. And they're fighting to remain who they are. But we got this. And so those are just two things I wanted to interject to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how many of you have seen the video of Jasmine Crockett dancing, doing the dance that Kendrick Lamar did that night when he's singing "They Are Not Like Us." You should Google Jasmine Crockett dancing. She was castigated by white people, especially white women. She doing a ghetto dance instead of fighting against Musk and Trump. She's dancing and like she's in the club instead of fighting for our rights. And then of course there were those who used keywords to call her a nigger without saying that that's what they were saying. I think that was important also. Now the thing that caused them to respond the way they did, or at least part of it, was because she she was coming out of her office on her way to Trump's speech. And she was sending a message, they're not like us. That's what she was dancing to. And white people have always told us that dancing was a sin because they can't dance, I guess. But anything that we did with rhythm and music and song has always been put down as being something that should be shunned and straight up out of the ghetto. The whole phrase of ghetto now came from Germany when the Jews under Hitler lived in was forced to live in shanty houses and had to hide themselves within their communities from him. But that's where that word ghetto came from. It came from Germany. And it was made applicable to us because they put us in open air concentration camps called projects. I'm done. If there, go ahead.
Pastor, I'm looking, well, I'm going to say, I yield whoever's going to talk. I yield.
Just a quick question. Doesn't that word ghetto come from Yiddish or something like
Yes.
that?
Yiddish, yes, it does. And Yiddish is a German dialect.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Huh? Okay, Evan?
I was going to say, and it's all about mindset because you have African people who don't think spiritual. So I look at that as you have African Americans who don't have the same mindset as the African or the spiritual family, because you got people who are African who don't treat each other the way they should. You know what I mean? They don't treat them right. So when he put that message out there, it's like, there's a lot of people ain't like us. Just because they're in their skin, we all ain't kin. And I'm talking about the mindset of that. So yeah, that was a big message that he sent.
And that's what we're talking about, Evelyn, mindset. Because, I mean, you got people on this right now, listening right now, and have listened before. And they're just hateful as hell. And towards each other. You know, when we grew up, and I'm sure as many of you on here who grew up the same way, if your neighbor needed something, you gave it to them. Whether it was a cup of sugar or whether it was you washing their clothes. It was like everything that we had belonged to the community, and we shared it. And I will tell you straight up, the Africans who don't share, they ain't like us. And that mindset, like the religious people, they're not like us. So it's not that you separate them out. Anyone with a European mindset is no different than a European. And anyone with the African mindset is no different than the African. That's it. Because it is not the color of your skin that makes you who you are. It is your mindset that determines your journey, and it determines who you are. Does that make sense, Evan?
Yes, I agree.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ron?
No, I'm just listening. I don't have a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions or comments, then I know we've said a lot today. And I want to say to us, let's look forward to tomorrow. If you have any questions after you get off, then please jot them down and I'll put them in your phone or whatever so that we can address them tomorrow. And I want to express my sincere gratitude for you guys being here today. And I'm very grateful for the energy that you present and that I'm able to absorb, strengthening me, but also strengthening all of us. So be safe today and enjoy the rest of it.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Thank
Same
you.
to you and everyone.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye for now.